Gross little fungus gnats. They've been living in my potted plants for over a year, and the sticky traps helped, but they did not achieve total annihilation as I had hoped. I just administered a coup de grace here. So it was time to employ some biological warfare, and specifically nematodes, which are said to eat the larvae and the eggs of the gnats inside the soil. If you look beneath the surface of the soil, you'll probably find some of the larvae wiggling around. They're just as nasty as the adults, and certainly they deserve death. There's several companies selling these predatory nematodes, and I went with the Nemaglobe Pot Popper from Environmental Factors. What you receive is this container that has a plastic baggie within it, and this contains the individual tea bag-like packets of tiny little nematode balls. I realized at this point that I was probably going to have an issue with the viability or survival of my little worms because they're kept at 100% humidity, and I had ordered them when the temperature was below freezing, so they likely went through a freeze-thaw cycle, and that will definitely kill a lot of microorganisms. That was the main reason why I decided to bring my worms to the lab and to check if any of them had survived the voyage. And I was going to complain to the company about how they're not shipping them in the proper conditions. But when I went on the website, I saw that they very clearly say, do not order them if the temperature is below freezing in your area. So that was my own fault. So don't make the same mistake that I did. And you probably don't want to order them when it's super hot in your area either, because they're going to cook in steam, and that will also affect them negatively. You can see the little individual grains here, and I counted there was about 200 per pouch. So then I decided that I'm going to use this and try to calculate what is the total number of nematodes that I'm getting. They're promising 1 million nematodes per one of these tea baggies, but who's going to check, really? Well, nerds like me, that's who. What I'm doing here is that I took one of the grains and I'm trying to dissolve it in some basic saline. I tried a few different things like regular cell culture media, just pure water, and saline, and they were actually really, really difficult to break apart. They're encased in this kind of like resin. That's what makes up that little ball. And I guess this is what allows for gradual release of the nematodes. And this really makes sense since the goal is eradication, because if they all came out at once, there would be this one great battle. But little stragglers or flyers that came and laid some eggs later, they might be able to repopulate the place. So this way you have advancing waves of nematodes that are dealing with the problem, and I quite like that as a concept. It was time to take a look under the microscope, and it wasn't looking good. It was a lot of dead nematodes. I was able to get a count, and I can't really be that confident in my counting because I was never able to fully dissolve the little balls. So I know there was some guys trapped inside there. And from the ones that I did release, I saw about 500,000. And that's actually not bad at all. That's telling me that, it's probably pretty close, if not, maybe even over what they're promising. If I had counted something like tenfold less, I would have been concerned, but it's definitely looking like they're not skimming you on nematodes. You're getting your million nematodes. I was heartbroken to see all these dead worms, and of course my first thought was that they froze to death, but I realized that maybe I was too rough when I was using this syringe to try to break up the pellet. These are not single-cell organisms. They are just little microscopic worms, so I could have just mangled them physically too much. So I took a new pellet, and this time I just gently smushed it in some media, and then I put it into a shaking incubator with some warm temperature to see if maybe I could find some live ones. And behold, there was a wiggler. Let us also admire him under greater magnification. It seems that the pointy end is the butt and the more blunt end is the head, I guess if you can call it that. Look at this guy. What a goofball. Here's a shot under a different microscope where we see the little worms encased inside the pellet. They seem to be in some sort of suspended animation, dormant stage, and maybe water wakes them up. These guys have been soaking for a while, and you can see that they're starting to come alive. And considering that they went through a freeze, I'm actually quite happy with the overall survival, which I would say is probably about 50%. Here's a nice little time lapse that shows that even some of the ones that looked at, they actually are moving also. They're just sleepy. It was time to release the nematodes. So I actually broke up each pouch and I used maybe 1/10 of what was indicated, which is one pouch, namely 1 million per 5-gallon container, because I thought, rightly or wrongly, well, they're going to get a chance to reproduce in the soil. And if I find that it's not having an effect, then I can just add the rest later. But I wanted to see if there will be an effect with a fraction of what they call for. It's been a week, and today I noticed that there's no new flies stuck to my yellow stickies, so it appears to be working. The gnats have their own little life cycle, so it could be that they're just waiting to hatch, and there's gonna be another huge invasion. If that happens, I will put an update in the comment. But thus far, it appears to have been successful, and overall, I'm quite happy with the nemaglobe because one, they're not lying about how many nematodes you're getting. Two, they manage to survive even in suboptimal conditions. And three, well, it appears to be working. I really was hoping to find some kind of larva and maybe I could film a microscopic nematode versus larva fight, but it wasn't, yeah, that didn't happen. Overall, recommend.